Not on the station. Not in the city. Not even the bravest warriors dared to stand too close. She was over 8 feet tall, her body covered in thick silver armor. Her eyes were like sharp fire, and her voice could make walls shake. Phyrexia was known as a destroyer, a leader in war, a living weapon. Every male of her kind feared her, even the generals. She walked through the busy space station as if she owned it. And maybe, in a way, she did. When she walked into a room, the noise died. When she passed by, people moved aside. No one wanted to be her enemy, but no one wanted to be her friend either. Then it happened. Jake, a human engineer, leaned against a wall in the docking bay. He was small compared to the tall alien races around him, but he looked relaxed, hands in his pockets, chewing something called gum. He was new on the station, and most didn't notice him until that moment. Phyrexia entered the bay, looking for a ship part. Her steps were loud. Her shadow fell over the crowd. Everyone quickly made space, except Jake. He stayed where he was, watching her with curious eyes. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. A real smile. Friendly. No fear. Just calm. "Hey," he said, nodding. "You look like you could use a good joke." The room froze. Everyone expected her to crush him like she had crushed others. A few people stepped back, waiting for the scream, waiting for the sound of bones breaking. But nothing happened. Phyrexia stopped. Her glowing eyes stared at the small human. Her hands didn't reach for her weapon. Her face, though hidden behind part of her helmet, showed no anger. Instead, there was something strange in her eyes. Confusion. No one had ever smiled at her before. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice low and firm. "I said," Jake repeated, "you look like you need a laugh." Someone dropped a tool. It clattered loudly, but still no one moved. All eyes were on her. Phyrexia tilted her head. Her lips pressed together, thinking. She could kill him in 1 second. She had done it before. But this human, he was not afraid. He didn't worship her. He didn't hate her. He didn't even care that she was huge or dangerous. He just looked interested. "Why are you not afraid of me?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "You've got cool armor, sure. But armor doesn't scare me. People scare me only when they forget how to smile." Someone gasped in the crowd. A soldier whispered, "He's dead." But Phyrexia didn't strike. She turned and walked away without another word. Jake watched her go and smiled again. "See you around," he said, like it was just another day. From that moment, whispers started across the station. The human smiled at her. She didn't kill him. Did she hesitate? What does it mean? No one could explain it. The strongest warrior had paused because of a human. Not just any human. One who smiled like nothing mattered. One who didn't bow, didn't run, and didn't treat her like a monster. Later that night, Phyrexia sat alone in her private quarters. She removed part of her heavy armor and looked at herself in the mirror. She had always seen a weapon, a beast, a tool for war. But Jake had looked at her like she was just someone having a bad day. And for the first time in many years, she wondered what it would feel like to be seen as more than her size, more than her power. Jake didn't know it yet, but his small smile had started something powerful, something dangerous, something beautiful. The next day, he returned to the same spot in the docking bay. Same stance, same smile. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring gifts. Just his calm, fearless self. And once again, Phyrexia walked by. This time she paused and nodded. Not a word was said, but that tiny gesture sent a wave of shock through the station. The war general had acknowledged a human. Behind closed doors, alien leaders whispered. Was this a trick? A trap? Was the human using something? But others were silent, watching, wondering. Because when the most feared alien in the galaxy slows down just to return a nod, something big is about to change. And it all began with a smile. Asterisk alien warnings, human curiosity, the whispers spread like fire. In every hallway, every room, every alien lounge of the station, one name was spoken. Jake, the human who smiled at the destroyer and lived. Some called it madness. Others called it a death wish. But one thing was clear. He had her attention. Now. And that made everyone uncomfortable. Jake, however, didn't care. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He fixed broken panels, refueled ships, and ran cable through dirty maintenance shafts. He liked coffee, quiet music, and making people laugh when things got tense. He never thought of himself as brave. But something about Phyrexia made him curious. He started showing up where she trained. From a distance at first. Just watching. No camera, no report, just eyes open and quiet. Then one day, during her combat drills, she caught him staring again. Her eyes narrowed. Her training blade paused in the air. Her soldiers stepped back, expecting a sudden outburst. But Threxia didn't roar. She walked straight up to Jake. "You keep watching me," she said. Jake shrugged. "You're amazing. To watch." She frowned. "You study me?" "No," he said with a half-smile. "I admire you." That one word, admire, landed like thunder. Threxia blinked. Her armor clicked as her body tensed. No one had ever said that before. Not even her own kind. Respect was earned through violence, not admiration. Affection was weakness. Connection was dangerous. She should have turned away. But she didn't. That night, her quarters stayed dark. For hours, she sat on the floor, thinking. Not about strategy. Not about war. About a human with soft eyes and easy words, who didn't fear her. Who didn't want anything, except to see her. Meanwhile, the station buzzed with warnings. Jake was called in by a senior human officer. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a tired voice. "You're playing with fire," she said. "This alien female is not a game. She's caused diplomatic problems. She's torn apart soldiers. You smiling at her might start something we can't stop." Jake leaned back. "I'm not starting anything. I just don't think she's what they say." Another alien, a thin creature with blue skin and long fingers, hissed in his ear later that day. "She is cursed. Death follows her. Keep away, or you'll vanish like the others." Jake simply smiled and replied, "She hasn't killed me yet." That answer made enemies. Several alien males from Threxia's own species watched Jake with narrowed eyes. To them, he was a threat. Not because he was strong, but because she didn't ignore him. She didn't treat him like dust. That meant something, and it made them furious. They approached her in the war chamber. "You let a human speak to you like you're soft?" one spat. "Have you lost your pride?" Threxia turned her head slowly. "Say that again." The male stepped back. "I do not answer to weaklings," she said, her voice cold. But in her mind, she heard Jake's voice again, gentle, curious, and real. Back at the lower deck, Jake sat on a supply crate, tossing a small tool in his hand. Threxia appeared at the edge of the corridor. He stood, surprised. "You came all the way down here?" he asked. She nodded. "No armor today." Jake noticed it right away. She wore a lighter suit. Her massive figure was still imposing, but now he could see more of her face, her real face. Tired, strong, beautiful in its own strange way. "Is that safe?" he joked. "The station might panic." She didn't laugh, but her voice was softer. "I wanted to see if you still looked at me the same way." Jake looked up at her and grinned. "Still amazing." For a second, silence fell. Just the quiet hum of the ship behind them. Then Threxia asked, almost whispering, "Why do you treat me like I'm normal?" Jake's smile faded a little. He stood up straight. "Because I think you want to be." And with that, he walked away, leaving her stunned. She stood there for minutes, unmoving. And that night, for the first time in her life, the destroyer of armies didn't dream of battle. She dreamed of being seen. Past scars and heavy armor rain echoed softly on the outer shell of the space station. Most life forms inside ignored. It was just simulated weather. But for Threxia, it brought back an old memory. One she had buried deep under years of war, orders, and steel. That night, she sat alone, staring at her own reflection in the dark glass. Not as a warrior, not as a leader, but as a being trying to remember who she was before the armor. She had scars. Not just from battle, but from things no blade could leave behind. The next day, Jake found her again, this time near a broken fuel line. He wasn't trying to see her. He was doing his job. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As he crawled from under the metal vent, he bumped right into her leg. "Whoa," he said, wiping oil from his face. "Didn't see you there." She looked down, silent. Most would have run. He simply stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "You all right?" he asked, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. "I remembered something I didn't want to," she replied. Jake didn't joke this time. He looked at her face, then at the metal plate on her left arm. It had deep scratches, old marks. "Is that from the battle at Azar Prime?" he asked. Threxia didn't answer. Instead, she slowly reached up and pressed a button near her shoulder. A quiet hiss escaped. Her armor unlocked slightly and slid away from her wrist. Jake stepped back, but not out of fear. He saw it got a long, thick scar. It wasn't from a blade. It wasn't clean. It was twisted, like something cruel had made it. A brand? A punishment? He couldn't tell. But it wasn't made in war. Phyrexia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Jake stepped forward carefully. Someone did that to you. Still, no words. Then she nodded. Just once that he lowered his voice. Was it before you became the Phyrexia everyone fears? She looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. I was taken. When I was still young. Before my strength grew. They made me fight in a pit. No armor. No choice. Only pain. I became a warrior because I had no other way to survive. Jake didn't blink. He just listened. And then, slowly, he knelt beside her. Not to beg, not to serve, but to meet her eyes. You're not a monster, he said softly. You're someone who survived something no one should have gone through. Her eyes widened a little. I'm not afraid of your size, he continued. I'm afraid no one ever asked you if you were okay. That broke something inside her. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she sat down beside him, armor clinking against the metal floor. They sat there in silence. Two souls, so different, yet suddenly so close. For the first time, someone didn't see her as a weapon. Not as a title. Not as a threat. Just as Phyrexia. Later that night, word spread again. She removed part of her armor. They whispered. He saw her scar. Rumors twisted fast. Some said she was weakening. Others said she was plotting something. No one understood the truth. She was healing. A few alien males from her species were furious. He is using her, they shouted. He's turning our strongest into something soft. But those words no longer reached her heart. Because that night, Jake left something outside her door. Not a weapon. Not a gift. Just a simple blanket. With a note. You don't always have to wear metal to stay strong. And for the first time in her adult life, Phyrexia slept without her armor. The plot to kill the human, the silence in the war council chamber was heavy. No one dared speak openly, but tension filled the air like poison. Phyrexia's name kept appearing in every conversation, and always with one human's name beside it. Jake. The one who smiled. The one who stood too close. The one who, without a single weapon, had changed her. To many, this was shame. To some, it was treason. The warriors of Phyrexia's kind gathered in secret. Not the young ones, but the old, proud males. The ones who once led her into battle. The ones who feared that her growing bond with the human was weakening her, softening her edge, turning her into something less. He is undoing years of strength, one growled. She must be reminded who she is, hissed another. No, said a third, with ice in his tone. He must be removed. The plan was set. Quiet. Clean. Jake would disappear. No one would speak of it, and Phyrexia would return to form, her mind cleared of human softness. But they underestimated her heart. That morning, Jake received a message. Free maintenance credit. Sublevel 9, Section B, 14. Engine leak alert. He smiled. Just another day. Another mess to clean. He grabbed his toolkit and headed for the lower decks, unaware of the eyes following him, step by step. The corridor was dim. Lights flickered. The air was damp and heavy. Jake crouched beside a panel, tool in hand, when a shadow moved behind him. He turned. 3 alien males stood, tall and armored, their faces full of disgust. You don't belong here, one said coldly. Jake stayed calm. You have a leak. I'm just here to. You've leaked your filth into her mind, the leader said. The second one reached for a stun rod. Time to fix a real problem. Jake stood up slowly. She's not yours to control. The moment he spoke, the first punch came. He hit the wall hard. Tools scattered. Blood touched his lip. He wiped it, looked up, and said, That all you got? They surrounded him. But before the second strike could land, an explosion of force shook the corridor. Phyrexia. She had arrived in full battle gear, eyes burning like molten fire. She didn't speak. She moved. Faster than lightning, she ripped one attacker off his feet and hurled him down the hall. The others turned to fight, but it was useless. Her rage was not loud. It was sharp, cold, focused. She moved like death itself, precise and unstoppable. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Jake lay on the floor, bruised but alive. He looked up at her, breathing hard. I guess they don't like me, he joked. She didn't laugh. She knelt beside him and placed a hand on his chest. Not with pressure, but with care. You were almost taken from me, she said, her voice low. Because of me. Jake shook his head. No, because they're afraid. Of what? She wondered. A human? No, they were afraid of what she was becoming. Someone who chose kindness. Someone who could love. By the time the council heard about the attack, the story had spread faster than fire in dry grass. Phyrexia had defended a human. Not in war. Not as a mission. As a choice. The council summoned her. They called it a violation of warrior code. They said she had shamed her bloodline. She stood before them tall, calm, and unshaken. Would you rather I stood by while a good man died? She asked. You forget who you are, one elder said. No, Phyrexia replied, her voice like thunder. I remember exactly who I am. For the first time in years. And so they did what they feared most. They banished her. Not for weakness, but for loving a human. Exile for love. They didn't even look her in the eye when they cast her out. The council's judgment came in the form of a cold digital stamp. No ceremony, no honor, no words of thanks for her years of war. Just a blinking screen and a final command. You are hereby exiled from the Bloodborne. Your name will be removed from the warrior archives. You are no longer one of us. Phyrexia stood still as the words echoed in her mind. Her fists didn't clench. Her voice didn't rise. But deep inside, something cracked. Not from sadness. From freedom. She turned and left the chamber without a single word, leaving behind a legacy soaked in blood, metals, and fear. Jake waited for her on the outer deck, where ships came and went, where the sky never stopped moving. When she walked toward him, without her clan's crest, without the armor that once made enemies flee, he saw her in a way no one ever had. Not as a general, not as a weapon, just as Phyrexia. Is it done? He asked quietly. She nodded. I'm no longer one of them. Jake looked at her for a long moment. So what now? She didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars above the station, stars she had once traveled through as a conqueror. Now, they seemed wider, wilder, like they held new paths. I don't know, she said. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of not knowing. Jake smiled, a small, soft smile. Good. Then let's start with lunch. Phyrexia blinked. Lunch. He shrugged. It's a human tradition. When someone loses everything, we feed them something warm. That made her pause. Then she actually smiled. A real one. They sat in a quiet corner of the ship's mess hall. No one dared come near. Some still feared her. Others watched with curiosity. The great Phyrexia, eating with a human, using a spoon, asking what soup tasted like. Jake taught her. Between bites, he asked, would you go back if they begged you? She looked into his eyes. Not unless you came with me. He laughed. Deal. But peace was never simple. News of Phyrexia's exile spread across the galaxy. Some called it justice. Others whispered of betrayal. But a few, the quiet few, saw something more dangerous. Hope. If the Bloodborne's strongest warrior could choose a human, what else could change? In dark corners of other worlds, alien women who had been silenced, controlled, or ignored started to ask questions. Started to wonder. If Phyrexia could walk away from power for love, could they? The Galactic Council took notice. They didn't see it as love. They saw it as a threat. To them, Phyrexia was now a symbol. And symbols, if left unchecked, could become revolutions. So they made a new plan. Not exile this time. Capture. Divide her from the human. Use her strength for their gain. Or crush her before she became more dangerous. Jake and Phyrexia had no idea that while they shared soup and soft words, ships were moving. Orders were signed. Traps were being set. The galaxy was shifting. And all because one man smiled, and one warrior smiled back. Captured and caged, it began with a handshake and a lie. A council envoy arrived on a neutral transport ship, white, unarmed, and full of friendly faces. They said they wanted peace. Said they had rethought Phyrexia's exile. Said they wished to talk. Just talk. Jake was cautious. He had seen what fear could do to leaders. But Phyrexia, she wanted to believe. Somewhere deep inside, she hoped her old people had opened their hearts. So, for the first time since her exile, she wore her armor again. Not for war, but for honor. A sign of respect. A sign that maybe, just maybe, she could build something better. They docked at the diplomatic vessel under heavy protocols. No weapons. No guards. Just discussion. The trap was silent. One step into the central chamber, and it began. The floor panels locked. Invisible fields snapped into place. Phyrexia moved to protect Jake, but it was too fast. A pulse beam hit her spine. Her limbs froze. A chemical mist spilled from the ceiling. Her mind blurred. Jake shouted her name, but they had already taken her. She fell to her knees, paralyzed, but awake. "Don't worry," a voice echoed. "You're not being punished. You're being used properly." Jake fought to reach her, but a dozen guards swarmed him. They didn't kill him. They needed him alive, for control. Phyrexia's eyes found his just before her vision faded. And then she was gone. When she woke up, the lights were harsh and white. She was inside a containment pod, clear walls, thick locks, energy fields humming all around. Her arms were bound. Her legs weighted. They had kept her alive, but muted. Her power. They didn't want her dead. They wanted her obedient. Outside the pod, council members watched through screens. "She still looks dangerous," one said. "But the human will keep her in line." "But the human will keep her in line," said another. "She fights for him. We use that." They brought Jake in hours later, limping, bruised, cuffed, but his eyes still burned with fire. They threw him into a smaller cell beside hers. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Phyrexia," she looked at him. Her voice was weak, but clear. "I should have listened to you." Jake shook his head. "No, you wanted to believe they'd changed. That's not weakness." The guards stood outside, laughing. "Look at them, beasts who think they're in love." But love wasn't weakness. Love was the reason Jake didn't give up. Love was the reason Phyrexia began to fight again. Inside her, something started to rise. Not just anger, but purpose. They had tried to control her, tried to turn her into a symbol they could command. But they had forgotten who she was before the titles, before the battles. She was a girl who had survived the pits, a woman who had built her strength in chains. And now they had chained her again. That was their mistake. Late into the night, Jake tapped on the glass between them. "You once told me you survived things no one could imagine," he whispered. "Do it again." Phyrexia closed her eyes and remembered pain. She remembered how to push through it. And she began to rise. The pod groaned. Metal creaked. Energy fields flickered. The guards rushed in, weapons raised. But it was too late. Phyrexia had broken her bindings. Not for war, not for glory, for one man in the cell beside her. And the whole galaxy would soon feel the quake of her return. She dared to love, and the galaxy changed. The alarm sirens howled like wounded beasts. Lights flashed red across the space station as emergency doors slammed shut. But none of it could stop what was coming. Phyrexia had broken free. The pod that once held her now lay in twisted metal. She stepped out slowly, her breath steady, her eyes burning not with rage, but with purpose. Her armor cracked from the pressure of her escape, and her fists were still bleeding. But she didn't care. Jake watched from his cell as she crushed the lock mechanism with one hand. The glass shattered. "You came back," he whispered. She offered her hand. "I never left." They didn't run. They walked. Together. Step by step down the long corridor of that once proud council station. Soldiers appeared, weapons drawn, voices shaking. Phyrexia didn't speak. She didn't threaten. She only looked at them. Most lowered their weapons without a word. Some dropped them and ran. One dared to fire. She caught the blast in her palm and crushed the weapon in her bare hand. They made it to the main chamber where the council waited. Arrogant, cold, still believing they held power. "You've made a mistake," said one, standing up. "We gave you a chance to serve. You never wanted peace," Phyrexia said, voice deep like thunder rolling across a war field. "You wanted control. Love made you weak," another snapped. "We saved you from yourself." Jake stepped forward. His lips still bled, but his voice was clear. "No," he said. "Love made her stronger than any of you will ever understand." The chamber fell silent. Phyrexia took one final look at the faces that had cast her out, locked her up, and tried to use her. "I won't kill you," she said. "That's what warriors do. I'm something more now." And with that, she turned her back on them. Together, she and Jake boarded a stolen ship and launched into the stars, leaving behind the broken systems of old power, but they didn't disappear. What happened on that station was recorded by silent cameras, spread across systems, viewed by 1,000 species, shared by 1,000,000 voices. And something unexpected happened. Female warriors, slaves, servants, and silent leaders across alien worlds began to rise. Not with weapons, with questions. Why do we have to live by fear? Why can't strength be gentle? Why did she leave everything behind for a human? A movement began. Small, quiet, but real. They called it the Smile Rebellion. And its symbol, etched across ships and walls, was simple, a human smile. And beside it, a warrior's hand reaching back, and a one dared approach her before. Now, they followed her path, not because she was feared, but because she dared to love, and the galaxy would never be the same again.